me real quick, Tom, how you got started in music and how you managed to turn that into a career.
Well, a lot of times people have asked me through my career, how do you get started? How do you get started? And it starts with the passion. It starts with, I think a gift of music in your head. When I was a little kid, I mean, I used to go around singing all the time. In fact, when I was in sixth grade, I was singing so much that one of my best friends punched me in the stomach because I didn't even know I was singing, going around whistling and humming. But I always loved pop music. I had two older sisters. The oldest, is 5 years older than me. So even when I was like 6 years old, I had that junior high school musical education because my sister was 11 or 12. And so she was buying Elvis Presley and Hound Dog and the Everly Brothers, Wake Up Little Susie, and that whole early 45s, on the little spindle going around. I was just mesmerized by all that when I was 6 years old. So I was lucky to be around it before my time. You know what I mean? So I just always loved pop music. I bought 45 singles, and I think it was in sixth or seventh grade. I remember the song "Walk Don't Run" by the Ventures. Just the sound of an electric guitar. That's just absolutely mesmerized me, and it was on my dad for the next 2 years that I wanted to play an electric guitar. And in eighth grade, my dad was a musician, and he had a friend with a music store, and he got me for cost. He got me a Gretsch, not the Country Gentleman. I got that later. Gretsch Tennessean. It was a big, thick guitar, which at that time was not cool at all because the Beach Boys were cool with their Jaguars and Stratocasters. And but anyway, here I was with this big, bulky Gretsch guitar, and I just sat home and learned to play it, and was self-taught. And by the time I was 13, I was starting to write songs, and I don't know why. I just loved doing it, and I went out and bought the first sound on sound tape recorders, and I started recording and harmonizing, when I was 13, 14 years old, and I just never stopped.
So you actually started writing and recording your own songs at 13. Can you imagine, Tom, if you had all the tools of the trade today to record what you might have come up with?
No, I know. But, at the same time, it doesn't make any difference because I'm old school. It's still a melody and a chord progression and, and a good lyric, and all the technology in the world can't create that.
Yeah, you're right about that. Let me ask you something else. We've kidded around over the years. You're a songwriter, and because of that, you kind of work a little bit behind the scenes. But I know that, early on, in your music career, you were interested in playing in bands and being a performer yourself, correct?
Absolutely. I know. Like I said, I started writing when I was 13, and then when I was 14, the Beatles hit the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was just all over. And not only did my ugly Gretsch guitar, up to that point, that I wanted to trade in for some thin little thing like the Beach Boys played, but there was George Harrison with, I think the same guitar, if not the Country Gentleman, but the same look and the Gretsch. And all of a sudden, what I had was cool, and so that gave me a little boost. But immediately, here were these guys that were singing and writing their own songs, and it's just immediately what I wanted to do. And I had always loved Motown, which was also, they were kind of parallel universes going on at the same time, and the British Invasion with the Zombies, and so many great bands came out, and I just started writing and writing and writing, and I played in local groups, and we didn't really do original material because everybody wanted to hear the hits, So I played in a lot of cover bands, and occasionally I'd do an original song.
Now, were you able ever to get signed to a label in another band?
Yeah, I've been signed 2 or 3 times, I think. The first signing, I was in a band, my last band in the Midwest. I mean, I kind of worked my way up the ranks of garage bands to teen towns, and then by the time I was 20, I was touring with a couple of big Midwestern groups that were making good monies, and we had roadies and even a limousine, but I was frustrated because I wanted to do my own material, and we were doing Beach Boy medleys and oldies but goodies medleys, and everybody went crazy in all these college bars. But then, I'd get up and do my original song, and it was like, what's that? So eventually, really kind of at the peak, and I was making a good living. I knew I had to make the creative choice to get out of there. The last band I was in the Midwest was a band called The Guild out of St. Louis, and we were signed by Elektra, and made a single, had a singles deal, and nothing happened. It's so hard. But shortly after that, my frustration grew, and I had connections in LA. I knew my friend John Barrick, who worked with Irving Azoff. They were all Midwestern folks, and we came from the same little cell in Champaign, Illinois. And everybody slowly was migrating, and I finally got the message it was my turn. So I dumped my well-paying job back there with a wife and a baby, and headed west.
Great. Now, one of those bands you used to hang out was REO Speedwagon, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we used to play it. My bands and their bands played the exact same circuit back in the Midwest in the 70s.
Was it disappointing for you in some way? And this, I know it was frustrating, but was it disappointing to see some of your buddies in other bands, quote, making it, and you're kind of struggling?
No, really, because I was right on the heels. I mean, Dan Fogelberg came out with Irving, and I worked with Dan, and REO came out, and I came out pretty much right behind that. So I was working as soon as I got here. I mean, it was easier then. There was so many bands, and the record companies had money, so it didn't take long for me to start working. I did a little work with the Beach Boys, and then I went on the road with Dan Fogelberg, and I organized his backup band from musicians that I knew from the Midwest and out here, and that we called ourselves Fool's Gold, and we got a record deal very quickly. So I had a record deal within a year and a half after I'd moved here, just after a little bit of touring.